The opening of this story plunges the reader immediately into a scene of shocking brutality, where a woman is violently kicked in the head. The sheer audacity and cruelty of this act is designed to evoke a visceral reaction, capturing attention through the raw emotion it elicits. This is not just a moment of physical violence, it is a reflection of the power dynamics at play within the unit, a place where authority has been misused and moral boundaries have been violated. The victim, though unnamed in the title, becomes a symbol of vulnerability in the face of unchecked aggression, representing the countless individuals who endure mistreatment silently in systems that claim to uphold discipline and order. The brutality itself serves as a mirror to the audience, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable reality that even in structured environments, cruelty can thrive when accountability is absent. The initial act of violence is carefully chosen to create empathy and outrage simultaneously. It positions the reader to feel not just concern for the victim's immediate physical safety, but also anger at the systemic failure that allowed such abuse to occur. By opening with this intense incident, the narrative establishes a moral baseline, immediately framing the story around themes of injustice and the human cost of negligence. The use of a head kick, rather than a less severe form of aggression, amplifies the stakes. It underscores the seriousness of the abuse and the potential for lasting harm, highlighting how deeply wrong the actions of the perpetrators are. The reader is invited to feel the gravity of the situation through the sheer physicality and audacity of the attack, which conveys not only pain but a profound violation of personal dignity. Beyond the physical violence, the act carries psychological weight. It communicates the pervasive culture of intimidation and fear that may exist within such environments, where those in positions of power exploit their authority to dominate or harm others. This initial act sets the stage for the rest of the narrative, creating a tension that begs for resolution, compelling the audience to anticipate the arrival of justice. By highlighting this moment of injustice first, the story establishes a contrast that will make subsequent interventions by authority figures, such as the general's arrival, all the more impactful. It also positions the reader to reflect on the broader societal implications of abuse of power, encouraging questions about morality, leadership, and the structures that allow such incidents to occur. In essence, this opening moment of brutality is not merely shock value. It is a carefully constructed entry point that immerses the reader in the stakes, emotions, and ethical dilemmas at the heart of the story. It forces recognition of wrongdoing, sets the moral compass for the narrative, and primes the audience for the dramatic intervention that follows, making the injustice itself the catalyst for empathy, tension, and engagement. The arrival of the three generals serves as a dramatic turning point in the narrative, signaling a sudden shift from chaos and injustice to authority and accountability. In the moments following the violent act against the woman, the story builds tension by placing the audience in a state of anticipation, prompting questions about whether anyone in power will intervene. The general's presence embodies the concept of unexpected intervention, where justice appears not gradually, but decisively and immediately, transforming the trajectory of events. This intervention is not only a physical presence, it carries symbolic weight. The generals represent the highest levels of oversight within the military hierarchy, and their arrival underscores that wrongdoing, no matter how entrenched or seemingly tolerated within a lower-level unit, is ultimately visible to those who wield true authority. Their timing is crucial. It is minutes after the abuse, creating a sense of immediacy that reinforces the dramatic impact of their intervention. This is not a delayed response or a bureaucratic investigation. It is action that confronts injustice head-on, demonstrating that intervention can be swift, firm, and effective. The presence of multiple generals amplifies the gravity of the situation. A single officer might carry authority, but three generals together convey unanimity, weight, and seriousness. Their collective appearance suggests that the offense was not minor, and that the breach of conduct has drawn the attention of the highest, ranking officials. This detail intensifies the story's emotional resonance, showing readers that the system, when functioning properly, has mechanisms to protect the vulnerable and correct wrongs. It also highlights the theme that power, when exercised responsibly, can restore balance. The narrative emphasizes that the intervention was not a passive observation, but a decisive action, shutting down the unit, demonstrating that authority is most impactful when paired with immediate and meaningful consequences. The story, through this intervention, communicates a larger message. Wrongdoing cannot flourish indefinitely when oversight exists and when those in positions of responsibility act with courage and decisiveness. Beyond the structural implications, the general's arrival also underscores the human element of leadership. They are figures who, despite the hierarchy and the layers of command, are willing to step into a tense and potentially dangerous situation to right a wrong. This portrays leadership as an active, morally driven force rather than a distant or symbolic role. The unexpected intervention creates a sense of relief and vindication for both the victim and the audience, satisfying the innate desire for justice and reinforcing the belief that higher authority can and should act in the face of injustice. It shifts the narrative from despair to hope, showing that even in the darkest moments, accountability and protection can arrive suddenly and decisively. Ultimately, this moment reinforces a universal truth that intervention, especially when timely and authoritative, can dramatically alter outcomes, prevent further harm, and restore faith in the structures designed to safeguard integrity and human dignity. The story subtly emphasizes courage under fire, not necessarily through overt heroics, but through resilience, endurance, and the quiet strength of individuals caught in extreme circumstances. While the title focuses on the violent act and the subsequent arrival of generals, the undercurrent of bravery permeates the narrative. In the face of a sudden, brutal attack, the victim exhibits a form of courage that is both immediate and instinctive. Enduring such an act of violence, particularly one that targets the head, requires a resilience that goes beyond physical survival. It involves mental fortitude, the ability to process shock, and the strength to remain composed in a situation that is both life-threatening and psychologically traumatizing. This form of courage is often overlooked in traditional narratives that glorify overt action. Here, the courage lies in enduring what is intolerable, in surviving the moment while maintaining a sense of self despite the dehumanizing intent of the aggressors. The story also highlights another dimension of courage through the actions of those who respond to the injustice. The three generals, by appearing decisively and confronting the abusive unit, display moral courage that complements the victim's resilience. Their intervention is not without risk. It challenges entrenched behaviors and disrupts an environment that has tolerated wrongdoing. This form of courage involves stepping into a volatile situation with authority, but without knowing all the variables, demonstrating that bravery is often a conscious choice rather than a natural impulse. The narrative reinforces that courage is multifaceted. It is not always about physical confrontation. It is about standing firm in the face of wrongdoing, advocating for justice, and taking responsibility when circumstances demand action. The general's presence reinforces the concept that true courage often comes with accountability, the willingness to act decisively to protect others and enforce ethical standards, even when it is uncomfortable or politically risky. Beyond these explicit examples, the story implicitly encourages reflection on the courage required within hierarchical systems to speak out, intervene, or simply survive abusive conditions. It challenges the reader to consider how many acts of bravery go unnoticed in environments where fear and intimidation prevail. By contrasting the initial act of violence with the swift response of authority, the narrative creates a layered understanding of courage, showing that heroism is not singular but interconnected, spanning the victim's endurance, the moral decisiveness of the generals, and the systemic potential for action against abuse. Moreover, the story demonstrates that courage under fire can have cascading effects. The victim's survival, combined with the general's intervention, sends a powerful message that bravery, whether through resistance, endurance, or decisive action, can disrupt cycles of abuse and catalyze systemic change. It reinforces the idea that courage is both a personal and collective force, capable of transforming moments of fear and oppression into instances of justice and accountability. In essence, the story portrays courage under fire as a quiet, persistent, and transformative force, showing that even in situations where individuals appear powerless, bravery manifests through resilience, moral conviction, and the willingness to confront injustice head-on, ultimately shaping outcomes in ways that extend far beyond the immediate moment. The story underscores the critical importance of systemic accountability, showing that no unit or individual operates outside the reach of oversight when abuses occur. The shocking act of violence against the woman is not merely a personal attack. It reflects a breakdown in the system meant to enforce discipline, order, and ethical behavior. Within hierarchical institutions like the military, power comes with responsibility, and when that responsibility is neglected, the consequences can be severe, not just for the victims, but for the integrity of the organization as a whole. By introducing the intervention of 3 generals who decisively shut down the abusive unit, the narrative highlights that accountability is not optional. It is essential to maintaining the legitimacy and effectiveness of any structured system. This moment conveys a powerful message: actions have consequences, and those in positions of authority are ultimately answerable for the conduct of those under their command. The shutting down of the unit is a dramatic, symbolic act, emphasizing that systemic accountability is not merely about reprimanding individuals, but about addressing structural failings that allow abuse to persist. It demonstrates that when an institution functions correctly, it has mechanisms to identify and correct wrongdoing, ensuring that violations do not continue unchecked. The story also reflects the idea that accountability serves as both a deterrent and a corrective measure. The perpetrators of violence are confronted with immediate consequences, making it clear that abuse cannot be tolerated or hidden. This reinforces the principle that a system's credibility depends on its willingness to act against misconduct, no matter how entrenched or widespread it may be within a unit or organization. Beyond the immediate consequences, the narrative suggests that systemic accountability is vital for fostering a culture of ethical behavior. When leaders intervene decisively, they set a standard, showing that abuse and misconduct will not be ignored. This has a ripple effect throughout the institution, signaling to others that integrity, fairness, and respect are non-negotiable values. It also empowers those who might otherwise feel powerless to trust that the system can protect them and act in their interest. Moreover, systemic accountability encompasses not only punishment but prevention. By shutting down the unit, the generals are removing an environment that allowed abuse to flourish, thereby preventing further harm to future individuals. The action demonstrates that accountability is proactive as well as reactive. It seeks to correct existing wrongs while creating conditions that discourage misconduct. In essence, the story illustrates that systemic accountability is the backbone of any ethical institution. Without it, abuses can become normalized, trust erodes, and the moral and operational foundations of the organization weaken. by emphasizing the decisive intervention of high-ranking leaders. The narrative portrays accountability as a mechanism that preserves justice, protects the vulnerable, and maintains the credibility of the system itself. It reinforces the idea that no matter the power wielded by individuals at lower levels, ultimate oversight exists, and ethical enforcement is not only possible but necessary to sustain order, safety, and justice within the institution. The story ultimately illustrates the triumph of justice over fear, a theme that resonates deeply because it reflects a universal desire for fairness and moral order. From the outset, the situation is dire. A woman is subjected to extreme violence, an act designed to intimidate and suppress, creating an environment of fear and helplessness. This fear is not limited to the immediate victim. It permeates the unit, affecting anyone who witnesses or is aware of the abuse, reinforcing a culture where power is misused and wrongdoing seems untouchable. Yet, the narrative turns on a pivotal moment, the arrival of 3 generals who intervene decisively. Their appearance transforms the atmosphere, replacing intimidation with authority and demonstrating that fear is not invincible. Justice, in this instance, is not theoretical or delayed. It is immediate, tangible, and consequential. The act of shutting down the unit sends a clear message that abusive behavior, no matter how entrenched or audacious, has consequences. It reassures the audience and the victim that moral order is possible and that the system, when functioning correctly, can act to protect the vulnerable. This triumph is powerful because it is both symbolic and practical. Symbolically, it reinforces the idea that courage, ethical leadership, and oversight can overcome even the most oppressive situations. Practically, it restores safety and integrity within the environment, ensuring that further harm is prevented. The narrative thus emphasizes that fear, while it may dominate in moments of unchecked power, is ultimately subordinate to justice when the right actions are taken. Another layer of this triumph lies in its inspirational quality. Readers or viewers are reminded that standing up to wrongdoing, whether through direct action, resilience, or institutional mechanisms, can yield real transformative results. The intervention of the generals highlights that individuals in positions of responsibility have the capacity to effect change, and that ethical action at the right moment can dismantle systems of fear and abuse. This creates a sense of hope and reinforces the moral that justice is attainable, even in situations that appear hopeless or heavily skewed in favor of the oppressor. Additionally, the story demonstrates that the triumph of justice over fear is not merely about punishing the wrongdoers, it is about restoring balance, dignity, and trust. The victim, previously subjected to violence and intimidation, now experiences a form of vindication, and the broader community witnesses that accountability exists. This serves as a preventative measure, discouraging future misconduct and reinforcing the principle that ethical behavior is rewarded while cruelty and abuse are condemned. Ultimately, the narrative frames justice as a dynamic force capable of confronting and dismantling fear, showing that moral courage, decisive action, and institutional integrity can prevail even in the most daunting circumstances. The story becomes a testament to the enduring power of right over wrong, illustrating that no matter how pervasive fear may seem, justice has the ability to assert itself, protect the vulnerable, and restore order, leaving both the characters and the audience with a profound sense of moral satisfaction and hope.